Today, it's Edwin's Monday evening property rant. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, World Notice Post covering finance and property news Monday evening once again. And of course, Edwin is with me for another rant. Edwin, you're a bit shaken.
I'm a bit shaken, I'm a bit wobbly, and shake, rattle, and roll. But you know what's shaking and what's cooking. What's shaking and what's cooking is apart from the mountains about to go down to the Sydney Basin due to the earthquake, the earth tremor. But it's also what's shaking in the property world and political world is Albo Grings and Co. Real Estate Group are about to launch the biggest property campaign out, Martin. So that's what's shaking.
We live in crazy times. This last week was pretty remarkable, wasn't it? If you think about all the things that have gone on. You know, we had the Greens, of course, come out with their real big call for, I suppose you could say, a different approach to property. So they're going to launch their own franchise. They're going to launch a public corporation to build properties and deal with the the problem in their own way. I don't know whether you saw there was a debate last week with them and the Property Council. It was, I think, on the Wednesday lunchtime session, and it was really interesting seeing the supply and demand debate go on. I have to say, I think the Greens won the argument over the Property Council, but perhaps I would say that. But I mean, wherever you look, it's crazy. And of course, the latest from Tasmania is, guess what? We're going to actually offer zero deposit opportunities to buy property. This came out, the Tasmanian Labor has announced a shared equity scheme to buy a house with no deposit, zero deposit as part of their state election campaign. Talk about the politicization of property. Pretty crazy.
But this is where the Greens, the Labor, and everybody else in between, including ScoMo and the likes, and it's not ScoMo anymore, is it? I'm living in the past, Martin.
That was then. This is now. But yeah, same story.
Yes. Same, different name, same bullshit. It's a simple fact that nobody's talking about how the hell we're going to build these.
Yep.
Nobody's talking about the cost of construction, Martin. The major parties, the Greens and everybody else in between, as I said, they're not talking about the cost of construction. They're not talking about the fact that gyprocking is going to increase in cost by up to 30%. As our insiders in the building industry are telling us, they're not talking about the fact that we're losing more third and fourth year apprentices. This is hot off the press. We are losing more third and fourth year apprentices because they're looking at the pay packet at the end of the week, and they're looking at what their mates are getting by government handouts, and they're saying, "Well, shit, why am I busting my cojones to go out there and earn a living and learn a trade when the handouts are coming left, right, and centre, and my mates are at the pub and just having a great time." Obviously, these are the younger ones that don't look for the future. They're just living on a week by week or a month by month basis. But that's the general. That is the consensus, Martin. This is the thing. Now you can talk about all you want about bringing in a new talent from overseas, but as we've been saying over and over again, the talent that's coming from overseas, in the majority, as Bob the Builder in the HIA insiders have told us, is that they're not cutting the mustard. They're not cutting the mustard. They're not building to our regs. They can't build to our standards, and a lot of works are being delayed because they're having to redo and do again what was done and what was meant to be delivered 6-12 months ago. So when you've got all these state government projects as well as federal government projects that are absorbing a lot of the local talent, there's not much chop out there to build residential properties. So there's a lot of stuff going on with infrastructure in all states. They're building, at least they're doing something, but which has absorbed a lot of the good talent. And what we're left with is what we're going to be discussing later on about what David Chandler's brought out, some thoughts that he has to offer as well, is shoddy construction everywhere. Small building companies are going broke. They're not able to meet the deadlines. And because they're not able to meet the deadlines, prices are going up. And the fixed price contracts that they got involved with, from as early as a year ago or 2 years ago, they're not cutting it, and they're going bust everywhere. So from your small to medium tier to your even some first tier builders are somewhat wobbly. So how are we going to build it? That's my question. How are they going to build all these homes that are that people are going to go out and buy, and also with everything that they talk about, from the Greens to everybody else, I asked the question: define a home. First of all, give me a definition of a home, because most of it is centered, I can guarantee you, on Dusty and Evan. I can swear on Dusty and Evan that 95% of the construction will be high rise.
Absolutely. Well, they've further pushed the planning regs in and around Sydney on the Northern Rail line between Wollongong and Newcastle to basically say they won't now turn down applications just based on height. So they've sort of allowed effectively, build up. Well, the problem with building up is, one, a lot of people don't want to live in high rise in the first place, and two, the costs and quality of construction of high rise is pretty shoddy, as we've discussed before. But we should just sort of step back slightly, because of course, it is a real crisis, and I'm in a way relieved that finally, the media is beginning to talk about it. So this came out, rental crisis worse than the 90s recession. And this is talking about New South Wales from PropTrack, and basically saying it's a problem. If you go up to Queensland, squeeze is choking. We've got an unfathomable crisis. And again, talking about the problem of affordability and the rental crisis there. Rents in Gold Coast and Queensland hit new peaks. Adelaide, the same too. So pretty much wherever you look, the truth is that property is absolutely all over the place. And the problem I have is that the issue of trying to actually create more demand, in other words, give a bit more money to people to allow them to try and buy in, is going to distort the market further. Saul Eslek said that relating to Tasmania, and I agree. It could put prices up a little bit, but it's not getting close to the fundamentals that you're talking about, which is we haven't got the capacity to build. If we do build, we're going to build the wrong type of property in the wrong place. And with the high migration that we've got in any case, there will simply not be enough supply of property to go anywhere close to meeting the demand we've got. So the politicians are just leading towards short-term fixes to try and address the immediate, but it's a political fix. It's not a real fix, and it will actually make the situation worse. And we've seen that, frankly, for the last 20 years plus.
100%, Martin. And this is where we said before, and we've said many times, and it's the purpose is to corral everybody in the cities. And if you look further afield, if you look into the real regional areas of New South Wales and any other state, and it's a different market and different trends. But we're going to be talking a bit more about that later on as well. What's expected of those markets based on the commercial decisions that banks are making. But look, everything that's playing out, and obviously what the mainstream media talk about, and what we try to bring to the attention of our viewers, is what's playing out in predominantly in Sydney, in the Sydney Basin, not so much your extended Sydney regions that incorporates the Central Coast, Wollongong and Lithgow, as many do, but more in the Central Basin, where a lot of the commentary happens, and where there's a lot of demand both for rentals as well as for young families or families wanting to get into the market, the first-time buyers that got sacrificed since since late 2019. They were the sacrificial lambs, and they keep on being thrown under buses, used as cannon fodder, and they're appeasing the minds of the young people by giving them handouts. And unfortunately, the young people don't realise. Not all, but I would say a good 60-70% don't realise what a detriment these gifts really are when it comes to valuing the property. Because, as I said, unless you're prepared to build and unless you're prepared to go hardcore building, all these grants, all they're doing is just fueling the fire of the existing dwellings and increasing the values of the existing dwellings and bringing about more competition. So you add it all into the mix. We're just adding to the competition and taking away from and not really adding to the supply side of things. So you're giving it with the right hand and you're really taking it away from them with the left hand. But the governments don't care, Martin. The governments don't care because at the end of the day, a transaction is a transaction. Stamp duty, and that's the heroin that the state governments are hooked on, and that'll continue to be. Watch this space as Australia reopens the doors for more overseas investment when it comes to buying off the plan as well, to stimulate the market and get the developers back in to build. Because right now developers don't want to build. They've done the figures, they've done the numbers, and unless the government puts their hand in the pocket, unless the state governments put their hand in the pocket and incentivize them to build, they're not going to build. So, but we're getting closer to that, Martin, as we posted out on Twitter last week.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And look, there's a broader context here too. If you look at the most recent data relating to new home loans, we've actually seen a significant fall, and that's true for both investor and owner-occupiers and first-time buyers as well. So lending is down, and that's because of the tighter lending standards. And, my view is that we are seeing more and more people unable to afford to get in. Cost of living pressures, of course, are massive at the moment. And again, another report that came out showed that the people who are now working multiple jobs, particularly younger people, more and more of them are actually essentially having to work multiple jobs just to get by. So that's the context for some of this. In other words, it's more and more difficult to afford to buy anything. The lending criteria are tighter than ever before. The momentum is going against rather than for. And in this context, all the politicians do is talk about, throwing a bit more fire on the sort of petrol on the fire for demand and build more stuff. But it really isn't going to cut the mustard, is it?
No, and the problem is, Martin, I know the figures, but I can't remember. I can't pinpoint where I read it. But I think the government, attributed to the government tally on the numbers that they're proposing, I think it's only 23,000 that are under construction. It's 23,000. But that's what's 23,000 dwellings. It's a drop. It's a drop in the swimming pool, in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, you could say. But it's not happening. This is where, and this is where you've got your Victorian government, basically open the doors for granny flats if you got enough space. Obviously, they've got to meet the building regs down there, the building requirements. And so forth, but at the end of the day, you still got to pay council contributions, and there are other added costs to go with it. But I go back to the point that we started the discussion of tonight, and that is we don't have the capacity to build as much or as many dwellings as what everybody would like to think that we have, and we've choked the supply for the last 7 to 8 years, where we've really choked it, and many LGAs have choked the supply. Because if they didn't choke the supply, and I'm not talking about your high-rise developments where the state government's had a lot of influence in those high-rise corridors. I'm not talking about not even really talking about your medium density developments, but we really choked the lifeline or the supply of property, which is your duplexes, your 3, 4 townhouse, 4 villa sites, where you've got properties in the North Shore that sit on 900, 1,200, 1,500 square meters that could comfortably accommodate 3 or 4 villas. So your small, medium-sized strata developments, as I said, your villas and townhouses, we really put a choke on that, or even your duplexes and triplexes, which you see a lot of in the West. And because of the not in my backyard, but now they've created a rod for themselves. They're falling on their own sword, because now the grandchildren, the children or grandchildren aren't able to live close to Nan and Pop, and they've got to basically skedaddle out to Penrith, Emu Plains, and beyond in order to find accommodation and buy the first home. And Nan and Pop, the not in my backyarders, have to commute all the way there. So because why? Because they can't buy. Historically, families would buy where the families where you basically grew up. That's one side. The other side of this equation is that the NIMBYs can't even retire in their own locale, because again, they don't have the villas. And I've seen prices of villas and townhouses in a lot of the established areas just skyrocket. I mean, these are properties that were built in the early 80s to mid 80s. I mean, they're fetching, they're just skyrocketing in terms of price, because the competition, they're going toe to toe not only with your WeeChat chatterers but they're in a lot of these areas, but they're also going toe to toe with a lot of empty nesters and retirees, or people who just want to literally downsize. And this is what they didn't get. So this is why I say that chokehold has been on the supply of property for 8 years, and it's not something that's not going to be fixed straight away. I keep on saying best case scenario is 3 to 5 years if we start putting shovel to the ground today.
Absolutely. long lead time to get everything done, even if they do tighten the planning rules and everything else. But there's another context again too that was reported recently, that inflation and rates might actually have to rebound higher. So there is a view from a number of economists, and this was actually at their Financial Review Business Summit, that said markets may not appreciate how quickly inflation can fall through the simple mechanics of the pandemic unwind, but in the long term, the new regime may well be rather different due to supply side constraints. And that means that essentially you could well see higher inflation, higher interest rates. So this is another factor in the mix, again, which people aren't actually factoring in. The expectation that we're going to see interest rates back down to where they were around the pandemic is unheard of. I think it's not going to happen again. We're going to see rates certainly be much higher for much longer. So that's another impost, again, when you actually sort of try and put it all together. And there was a very interesting observation too, which came in about what the Chinese. We've been talking about some of the Chinese and whether they're looking to sell or not. I know this caused a bit of a raucous on WeeChat chat, didn't it? When this came out, saying Chinese offload property after failing to keep up with the repayments. And specifically, they're talking about Tokyo. For decades, Chinese buyers poured money into high-rise apartments in Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, lured by the prospect of quick capital gains in the low interest rate environment. But data and analytical evidence suggests the trend is reversing. So, what did the WeeChat chats make of it?
Oh, look, the WeeChat chatters are just saying that the mainstream media and the mainstream buyers, unfortunately, are just 2 quarters behind what they are. But our viewers are certainly on par with the WeeChat chatters, because we bring the news on a week-to-week basis. So, the WeeChat chatters, basically agree with them, a lot of the sentiment, but in the majority of that, however, there's something with the fault is the appetite to buy. It may have dropped a little bit, but not as much as what the mainstream media were saying it would drop, and hence the reason why they were saying from 2 quarters ago, buy, the second wave. This is the second wave, get in, and more so because of the demand that was going to be created by overseas investors. And as I've been saying for quite a while now, the new kids on the block, the Vietnamese contingency, is becoming stronger by the week, Martin, and it's incredible to see what they're buying, and talking to the agents of the areas where they're buying. And it's not just your Cabramatta or Canley Heights or Canley Vales or Fairfields that they're buying into. The new money is buying, closer to your inner west, and heading up that corridor through Drummoyne, and up towards Chatswood as well. So you've got a huge contingency coming in. Then you've also got your silent tigers that have influenced a lot of this market as well. But in all that, what they're saying is that what the mainstream are focused on are just one individual points at a time. Whereas when you look at the market holistically, as we teach our followers to look at the markets holistically and look at all the influences, where the geopolitical influences, global economic hiccups, currency trends, crypto trends, and local trends, and the demographic shifts, and the polarization of many ethnic groups. And I'm purely talking about Sydney now. The polarization of many ethnic groups in the Sydney Basin, where you've got almost, you could almost you cross the road, and you think one day you're in Delhi, and then you cross the road to the other side of the street, and you're in outback Australia. That's what's happening, and this is and following and watching those trends, and this is what the WeeChat chatterers have adopted as well. Let me say, by sheer fact that a lot of the WeeChat chatterers have quoted DFA a number of times, and that is why I am led to believe that they follow our podcast as well. And I'm being serious with that. So in all this, Martin, what they're also saying with regards to that article is where a lot of the mainstream and a lot of the people, or let's call it the property pundits that want to get into the market out there, they get misled by misinformation that's been put out. And as I said in that tweet in response to Electrified, as I said in that, you've really got to look at, and you've got to break down what the chatterers or where this information has come from, and you've got to have an understanding of what they bought and what they considered, as you and I have been talking for about 2 years now, or perhaps even more, what they considered as dud investments, and why they're getting rid of these investments. Why the majority of it was off the plan, apartments that they bought in Melbourne and in Sydney, and why they were getting rid of them, because of the lackluster return and the cost to maintain these. The strata levels were just going through the roof, and what areas were the majority of these investments placed in, which is your Victorias. So when you and then you also got to have an understanding as to what they're buying. And so that way you can, our followers can be Johnny on the spine. They know who they're competing with, or who they're about to compete with in the markets, in the Sydney markets, across the Sydney Basin, and this is where again I say that the mainstream, and as so aptly put by the WeeChat chatterers, they're a quarter to 2 quarters behind the information that that the mainstream get, and those articles that you just posted up, that people can translate them, and that's what you and I, Martin, have been saying for quite a while now, because we've pieced all the information together from the WeeChat chatterers, from what Dusty and Evan have got over the years, and we're able to share firsthand to our followers.
Absolutely. Well, I always am amused. I think sometimes the mainstream must be listening to what we do, and then a few weeks later they prepare an article and put it up. But they're always behind the times relative to what we're seeing. And I guess because we've got our finger on the pulse a little bit more, maybe people who do follow us will have a bit of an early sense of what's going on. But wherever you look, it really is a bit of a mess at the moment. And I guess the question I've got is whether, in fact, the politicians have any idea at all about what's really going on, or not. And I come back to this simple view: the politicians only look at it through a lens of being re-elected. That's essentially all they're interested in. And so the real hard decisions that need to be taken to really tackle the root cause issues that we're seeing are way beyond, over the horizon from where politicians are actually operating at the moment. And that's really, to me, the critical problem we've got. We just will continue to go and slide down that hill. It'll be more difficult to afford to buy property. There'll be more people who will be homeless as a result of all this, as we've been talking about previously. And there's really no will to tackle the real issues that need to be tackled. So, I don't see a way out. And even as you say, even if we were to build dramatically, it will be a number of years before things are actually going to ease up. So unless they do turn down the dial on migrants, and of course the latest data shows that in fact the migration rate's still very high, we're seeing a lot of people coming to the country, there is no way out.
No, and this is where Max Chandler and the Greens don't get it. They don't get the mechanics of how it all works, because most of the politicians perhaps haven't been in a rental situation, haven't had to line up to get a rental, and nor had they had a real job. In the sense of having to sort of fight for something that everybody else, the constituents, are fighting for. They just get a political career and get money comes into the bank account week in, week out. And it's one of the industries, the fastest growing industry, if not in Australia, the whole world. But second to mining, I guess. So and this is where they miss it. And if the Max, the Max Chandlers that really understood the dynamics of what's happening, and look, that they're talking about it is a good thing, but as you say, Martin, it's just announceables. And it doesn't really get far. And we've been hearing the same rhetoric or similar rhetoric for the last 12 months already. Go out there and do something. And I put a tweet up there with regards to what's happening, what people are doing on the ground, where we're a property manager that's holding approximately 360 managements. So what they're facing on a day-to-day basis in managing the rent roll, because people don't have the money to pay, have lost the will to go out and knock on doors to get a job so they can have money to pay the rent. I mean, all sorts of strife. The stories that I'm hearing that are on the ground, it's just mind-boggling, to the point where people are just literally going over to the real estate offices and telling the property managers, look, I just can't live in the property anymore. I've put a friend or a relative in the property, and they're happy to take over the lease. I mean, it's crazy stuff what's out there. The same property manager today, after people read that tweet, they'll get a better idea of what I'm talking about. But and I spoke to the same property manager today, and I said, "How's it going? What are you doing?" And the property manager said, "I'm actually in the tribunal." I said, "Really? What are what's happening there?" And the property manager said, "I've got 15 arrears notices that I've got to handle, 5 of which are going to be, or 15 eviction notices, 5 of which are just they're out. There's just no helping them anymore. I mean, this is the real stuff that's going out there. And then when you got the political pundits, the politicians talking about managing 360,000 properties. I mean, in my books, that would represent close to 2,000 property managers that they would also have to employ, right? If they're going to be managing this, and they think it's going to be all rosy, right? They think that it's going to be hunky dory, that everything's going to flow really smooth. They really got no freaking idea, what they're wishing for. Apart from the fact that we have to build, and we have to build the right properties, and we have to stop talking about it and put shovel to the ground. But see, here's my novel idea, Martin, and this is what you and I have thrashed around before. Here's my novel idea, right? So to get the ball rolling, as we've said, we've got 26,000 property listings, or 27,000, over 27,000 now property listings in the Victoria region, of which I am convinced that of which there's about 9,000 properties that are being dumped on the market by investors, and they're willing to take a hit on the current price of the properties, and as long as the purchaser buys them for what they paid off the plan in 2017, 2018. Now, I would think that that's a good deal, right? So Chandler and his cronies can go out there and start buying them up and start putting the shit together, because nobody seems to want to buy these investment properties that are being dumped in the Melbourne region. You got to ask yourself the question: why don't they want to buy them? Why aren't renters jumping in and buying them? Apart from the fact that it's harder to get a loan. A lot of them are on a short tenure in between jobs. There's a lot of pain out there. People are just thinking of at the moment of surviving month by month, let alone having to go and get loans that are going to be choking them for the next 35 years. But look, it's a thought, right? There's 9,000 properties that could go out and purchase. I've spoken to a lot of the WeeChat chatterers. A lot of the WeeChat chatters, not myself, but Dusty and Edwin, spoken to a number of the WeeChat chatterers that are holding 2-3 properties that are bought off the plan from as far back as 2017, and as early as 2019. These are home and land packages out in the western regions of Melbourne. They'll be happy for the government to come and offer them what they paid for off the plan, and they'll be getting a good deal, given the fact that the cost to build them nowadays, and buy the land now and build would be 30% more than what they could buy them for. I mean, I don't know. That's just a thought, Martin. I mean, I'm just trying to be a little bit practical here.
Well, we know that the listings are up, and we'll come on to that shortly. I guess there's a very important question, which actually you posed in the response to Max Chandler Mather's comment, which was definition of house. We've covered that a little bit, but also, where will these homes be built? And that's the other critical question, right? Because the problem is that the capacity to build is a combination of people who can build, but also land where you can build on. And at the moment, I don't think they're thinking this through at all. So therefore, you need an alternative approach. So what about things like the vacant properties that exist? We know that there's a lot of vacant property around. We know that there's a lot of property where people are trying to sell and are unsuccessful at the moment. This is an indication that you have to think more broadly, rather than just say, well, we're going to build another X thousand, as though that somehow fixes it. So I think we're onto something here, but of course, the politicians will take some time to pick this up. They'll watch the show here, hopefully, and maybe we'll get some new ideas.
Yeah, and this is why I put on that other tweet, put your money where your mouth is. So let's make it happen. I'm happy to broker the deal at zero commission, because we know a lot of the investors that bought there that are wanting to get out. for what they paid. So put your money where your mouth is. Let's make it happen. But it won't happen because, as you say, Martin, it's all announceables. It's all, and the other thing is the constituents that generally vote for them don't want to move into these areas. Right, they don't want to move into the outskirts of your Sydneys. They don't want to move into the outskirts of your Melbournes. Look, I'm just thinking aloud here. Stone me, whatever. But a lot of the people that vote for Chandler and his mates, in my opinion, from what I've read and what I've been told, don't want to necessarily move further afield. They want to enjoy the lattes, sip along the lattes in the West, and and have the avocados on toast. I don't know. I'm just saying that's what Dusty tells me.
Yeah. Well, could be. I mean, there are a bunch of questions. Let's move the conversation forward because your other article, which you threw in the conversation, was this one, actually responding to one of the short posts that I made. Bank West branch closures, the impact on regional communities revealed. Now, this is, of course, very interesting because Bank West announced that they were going to effectively go all digital and close more than 40 branches in Western Australia. But it's interesting, the senators who are running the inquiry into the question of regional branch closures says, please explain. And in fact, they're going to be turning up to the inquiry to be held this week out in the regional community to explain why they're doing what they're doing. But, you've really made a broader point here about use online services or go elsewhere.
I mean, how crazy is that? But look, again, I'm just going to put my conspiracy hat on, right? And hopefully you don't get demonetized like you did a couple of weeks ago. But look, is a part of Agenda 2030. I don't know. It could be. For me, I've been saying that the regional areas, and what I consider to be regional areas, are your Central Coast, are your going down the south towards Wollongong, and over the mountains towards Lithgow, Bathurst, and Orange. I would consider to be the regional areas, and we said there was going to be a backswell of demand for these areas right through the lower mountains, mid mountains, and your Katumbas and that, in order to for people that just want longevity of a roof over their heads. And a little bit further afield, you've got your regional areas that can somewhat still be controlled, but further and beyond these areas, your regional areas of New South Wales, Queensland, Victoria, WA, and all this. This is where they are getting, which yourself and other commentators on DFA have talked about, how they're absolutely getting harpooned and trounced on. Because how does a regional town survive without banks or a pub, right? Because if you don't have a bank, if you don't have ready cash, you can't really have your pub as well, right? So you got to have both. They're symbiotic, right? And you've really got to have both. But all jokes aside, it's really crushing these townships, and in my opinion, it's forcing these smaller regional towns to just literally implode, because the industry will just, you can't go. Everything's going to be there's going to be a huge push for to transport everything closer to your regional areas, such as your Bathurst, your Orange, Lithgows, and then coming down. But the question is why? Why not make it more attractive for a lot of these young families that can work from home, that young teachers, nurses, and other professions, that if you build infrastructure in the regional areas of New South Wales, you could have a booming economy. But we're doing the opposite. We're shutting down. They're shutting down businesses that are necessary, for the growth of a town, and making it harder to make for the younger generation to make that decision to go regional and have a life change, have a change of life. And I dare say that there are some great public schools and high schools in a lot of these regional areas. From my conversations with colleagues, with people that I've worked with over the years, worst case scenario, what you're saving in money by living in the regional areas, a lot of the kids end up commuting, and the commute is just as long as traveling from your Woolworths down to Sydney. For students that go to private schools, no different over there. And from what I hear, what I know, what I've been told is that there's some great schools. So if that's, but if you start building greater infrastructure, in the regional areas, then you're obviously it's going to grow, and it's going to ease the pressure that we're facing in the Sydney Basin currently. And obviously it would be the same, I would imagine, in your Melbourne region. But I don't know, they're just thoughts, Martin. But I'd say that people are going to have no choice but to travel closer to the central areas, the commercial central hubs, and create more pressure, more upward pressure on rents, and put more upward pressure on property prices. And that's why I don't see an ease on pricing, whether it be rental or pricing in terms of buying a property in the near future, and not with everything else that's compounding it.
Well, the research shows that if you take a bank out of a place, then the commercial life of that place deteriorates quite quickly. And, evidence to the Senate inquiry into regional branch closures showed again and again that people are now being asked to drive hundreds of kilometers, just to go to a bank. But it's very interesting when you actually stop and say, well, why do I need to go into a branch? And there are three recent examples that I've had from people. The first was that their internet banking wasn't working, and they were told to go into a branch to see somebody to sort it out. Hang on, think about that. Internet banking not working, go into a branch. The second one was for identification purposes. They needed to go into the branch to prove their identity to continue banking, and they couldn't do that other than going into the branch. And the third one, which is the one that I hear a lot, is that we've still got a lot of regional communities still transacting in cash because you can't get digital contact adequately because the internet is not very well distributed across regional areas. And in some cases, commerce is still done on a cash basis. So despite the fact that ripping out ATMs and closing branches, cash is still required. And so it gets more and more difficult. And now people in these regional communities are being forced to buy safes to hold the cash and then drive a long distance with a large amount of cash in their car or van just to deposit it somewhere else. It is completely unacceptable. And so the regional branch inquiry, which the Senate's running at the moment, is really critical, but you've set it very nicely in a broader context, right? If there was a strategy to say, let's reweight towards regional Australia rather than away from regional Australia, let's invest in our regional communities. Let's get the banks to actually support the commercial growth of those regional communities. Let's build more property out there. You could turn this whole thing around. But at the moment, it's 15-minute cities and being centralized in these larger urban conglomerations where the story is going. So there's a really big opportunity to turn this around, but only if there's a vision, and politicians and vision seem to go in two different directions.
Yeah, and that's why I say, I know this is what Dusty tells me. I think it's Agenda 2030 from all sides. But the other point there, Martin, is that a lot of the people in these regional communities, they don't live in the town. A lot of them live, on the small farms further afield. So for them to go to town, even if it's just an excuse to go to the bank, then from the bank they hop over to the local pub, then they'll hop over to the local eatery or club if they've got a club, and this is how the community maintains that synergy, and
Yep.
it either grows or dies.
Correct.
So this is why uh, I say that it's all planned, and this goes back to our podcast almost 3.5 years ago, maybe a little bit more now, where we said, and I said, brought about that notion that all roads lead to Sydney. And yeah, and nobody can change my mind.
No, absolutely. Well, as I said, all the research globally as well as locally in Australia shows if you take away the commercial heart, the bank and or the post office, the community struggles to hang on, and for the very reasons you've said. Well, talking about hanging on, let's move the conversation forward. You mentioned David Chandler. He threw a little bit of a stone in the pond this time around. This is a time for purchasers' due diligence.
So again, David's new. We'd like to welcome David Chandler to DFA Walk the World, Monday night international Monday night property rants. And so he's been watching our show, Martin. So now he's singing from the same hymn book that we're singing from, that we've been preaching from, and this is yeah. Look, in essence, what's he saying that we haven't said,
Yep.
and more importantly now that a lot of these properties are going to be transacted, and they've been transacted because of FOMO, because of this fear of missing out, and the people that are going to get hammered with these are your first-time buyers, are your young people. I was talking to my son today, and looking for a property for my daughter now, and he was telling me about saying, oh, Dad, you were right. All my mates now that they didn't listen to you before, now they want to. They've got no choice but to start looking at apartments, and I've told them to reach out to you, and because you'll be able to help them out with the research and that. And this is why I've been critical. Even before we started doing the Monday night rants, Martin, as you know, when we talk online or converse beforehand, and if you look at some of my commentary from as far back as 2009, 2008, 2009, talking about the pitfalls of buying into high-rise developments, and the issues around high-rise developments, and how it was going to come back and bite people in the backside. And before that, or around the 2012 to 2015, I spoke a lot about how these properties were sold to overseas investors off the plan, and there was an article comes to mind that where I spoke about how the local Chinese real estate agents we're playing shenanigans with the purchasers, the mainland Chinese purchasers, and weren't disclosing a lot of the issues around the buildings and the developers and everything else. So this goes back to what we say, to do your research, do it thoroughly, and when people tell you that you can't get documents, that's bullshit. We've got ways and means of getting documents from developments, and knowing who built them, and knowing the history. But this is what, again, I'd like to welcome David Chandler to the Monday Night Property Rants, because he's basically telling the people that are on LinkedIn to follow these points that you and I have been talking about for years.
Yeah, and it is just worth dwelling slightly. So he said a lot of the developers are exploiting. Right. The initial purchasers now faced with consequences buildings with latent defects. Many of those properties are returning to the market as local demand peaks. This is a time to engage quality legal and conveyancing advice. It's time to see the strata records and inspect the common property. It's time to check who built those properties and if they're still in businesses. So this is absolutely what we've been saying. Do your due diligence, and especially if you're looking to buy high-rise, it's absolutely essential not just to take the word of the agent as gospel. You have to do your own due diligence. You have to do some research specifically about the construction process. So who was the lead developer? Who actually was involved in building it? What's the quality of that construction? Because, as Chandler says, and we've been saying, the trouble is a lot of the defects don't appear on day one, but down the track. And quite often, the particular construction company will have been Phoenix by that time, disappeared, and therefore you've got almost no recourse. So this is a really, really critical wake-up call. I'm glad that David's finally caught up.
Yeah, like I said, he's we welcome him to the show. I'm sure he'll follow our tips for the future, and we're able to share with his audience on LinkedIn.
Absolutely right. Let's move quickly to the numbers. Look, the story is pretty much the same. So let's start with Sydney. So that on the 4th, there were 16,351 listed properties in the Sydney region, according to Domain. 16,288 the following week, the week of the 11th. And once again, your chart shows that the listings are lower relative to last week still. So almost no change to the story there, Edwin.
Well, the thing that we're getting into fingernail biting territory right now, because based on the numbers from last year and this year, we're starting to pull away. Last year's numbers are starting to pull away. In other words, we've almost got 1,000 less listings on market than what we had same week 2023. And this is what I've been saying for the last couple of weeks is keep a close eye on the figures. It doesn't seem to be a lot of change, although I've noticed some change in some areas. But when we look at the numbers for last year, they're as I said, we're week on week we're about almost 1,000 more listings 2023 than now, and that is my concern. Where we're going to get again this, the turtle's going to pull its head back in and it's going to clam up for the winter months, and so that we could end up with a hell of a lot lower listings. But this week in particular was that a huge jump. We've been running about, for the last few weeks, we've been running about 500 or so, 500 to 600 listings less than the same weeks 2023. But this week, certainly a huge jump, which we alluded to in the last rant of last week.
Absolutely. Well, let's look at Melbourne, because the story is a little bit different there. So 27,100 on the 4th of March, jump forward, 27,158, and still a predominance of houses in that mix.
Yeah, and again, these are the houses out west. Houses out west in the regions of the outer skirts of the Melbourne region, where a lot of investors are dumping them on market, because when you look at the figures on the rental later on, we're going to see how that's tracking. But there's a lot of they're not going back into the rental number. They're coming back onto the sales ledger, and potentially we continue to see an increase in the listing numbers in the Melbourne region, because there's more shit that goes on in Melbourne continues to go on. And I guess this is where we're going to have to bring in a new segment, Martin, and that's get out of Victoria segment, because now they're going to bring in a tax. They're going to tax the four-wheel drives and the dual cab utes and everything else from the city. So it's the get out of Victoria segment. And is it any wonder? We said last week that watch this space as businesses, because of the hikes in the land tax hikes. are literally going to push manufacturers and commercial investors back into New South Wales. And hence another reason why I believe that the outer regions of the Sydney Basin are going to begin to take off in terms of your warehousing and commercial space, not necessarily the city region office space, but more in terms of warehousing and commercial and industrial space is going to potentially skyrocket in New South Wales. And this is another reason because literally it's a lot of these people, these politicians, don't realise that if you got anything, if you're involved with the property industry one way or another, it's more convenient to be driving around in a 4-wheel drive, a dual cab ute, and because from time to time you got to cart trailers, you got to cart goods, you got to cart products, it's just easier, more convenient. But hey. The powers that be have decided that they're going to throw that hat in the mix, and you can't anything bigger than mini minor or a Fiat Bambino. No go in the city of Melbourne.
Absolutely. It's pretty crazy. Let's talk about crazy in Brisbane as well. So last week in Brisbane, 3,294 properties were listed for sale in the Brisbane region and 3,365 the week later. So a slight rise, but a very, 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 very different story to Melbourne. And as I keep highlighting, Edwin, I think that the pressures in the Queensland market are actually accelerating rather than deaccelerating. But I also note now that some of those that are being listed were those bought by interstate purchases around the time of COVID and just after. And that's partly because the rental returns are not actually what people expected. And in fact, on Tuesday in my live show, I'm going to go through some of the net rental returns because there's some really interesting things that are happening now because of the costs of property relative to what people can rent them for, particularly in and around Brisbane. So this is part of the story here. So it may well be that we're going to see a bit of a rise in listings in Brisbane, and we saw this this time, but very different. On the auctions, it's an interesting... Go on. Yeah,
sorry, Mark. On that point, let's not forget that Queensland have now brought in late last year. They brought in the minimum standards for rentals as well. So that puts pressure on a lot of the investors that bought, interstate investors that bought, because they've got to get their home. So again, it's a more government policy that basically investors are just saying, let's get out of here. So it's going to come back to whether the supply is going to be absorbed by the demand, and how much, not so much of a haircut for what they bought, but how quickly do they want to sell? They'll, in my opinion, whilst the numbers are very low and the demand's very high, they'll still make money on what they bought from even 2 years ago or even 12 months ago. But supply and demand will be the determining factor there.
Spot on. And as you say, the hurdles now for holding investment property in and around Queensland has definitely got higher. And talking of the question of higher or not, let's talk about the auctions now. So, of course, last week we had a few situations where there were long weekends, etc., etc. This week looks pretty hot. But I think it's very important to talk about one very important issue that you've spoken about before, Edwin, and that is that, in fact, a lot of people are settling before the auction itself.
Yeah, and even now, our mate Tom seems to be catching on with what we've been saying from over 4 or 5 weeks ago. It's what we alluded to, and in the Tom Panos Index as well. He sold seven properties transacted, sold. He didn't call most of the auctions because in his rant he said that I think three or four may have been bought before the day of auction, but he still gets paid. So it's interesting, but he does he does make another comment, which I think is rather, yeah, more spin than anything else. And he basically says that vendors are delusional. And I say, I rebut his commentary there. I say, well, it's not so much that they're delusional. It's just that the market demands it. And if people, if the demand is so high, which is now is coming back to the figures, because he's obviously upset because he wants to have a perfect record, I guess. But not everything is going to sell, and not everything is going to sell at the prices that the vendors want. But people are paying silly money for properties, and they're making those offers, and those offers are being accepted prior to the auction, because as we've shared in our rant from weeks ago, and that is that people are just sick and tired of being outbid or outmaneuvered or whatever. They just want a roof over their head. There are people that are paying absolutely phenomenal amounts of money and borrowing absolutely phenomenal amounts of money. And as you said earlier on in the rant, that they're taking on 2-3 jobs in order to make to make those repayments. And it's not only just the one party, it's two parties of the household. The two partners in the household are making those decisions. But if you recall, Martin, we said that 2023 was the year of the hustle, and you really have to hustle. You really have to, in order to survive and get through 2024. You really have to hustle, and my interpretation of hustle was also, and I mentioned a number of times, you could have a white collar job by day and a blue collar job by night, and you can be in a t-shirt after dark because you're having to wash dishes at McDonald's on the closing hours, whatever the case may be. But that's just the nature of where we are, and that's just where the governments have positioned us, as much as that AFR article that you brought out earlier on was saying that higher rates are going to be with us for a while. One of the paragraphs in that article, if it's the same, I'm pretty sure it's the same article. One of the commentators was saying that, but all's good because people aren't spending as much on construction or renovations. That's one of the points that this whole inflation is created also, is that people aren't spending money on building new homes or renovating or adding to the homes in order to make it more to accommodate a larger group of people. So it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. And this is the situation that the quagmire situation that the government's put us in.
Yep, quagmires left, right, and centre. And another one, I guess, is the rental listings, which we can look at. This is the Sydney rental listings last week, 8239, small rise, 8356, but the vacancy rates are extremely low. And if you drop into Melbourne, 7899 last week, and 8,006, so very small moves again. And in both situations, the truth is, of course, that the rental demand is outstripping supply dramatically. And in fact, the headlines this week, as we've spoken about earlier on, were very low levels of rental capacity and availability, rents continuing to rise. In some cases, again, somebody contacted me and said, I've just had my rent lifted by 25%. I don't know what to do because I can't find an alternative. What do? Just pay it? It's like I've got no choice. And that is the sort of archetypal problem. So do you stay in the property you've got and just pay more and more and therefore spend less and less elsewhere? Or do you try and find somewhere cheaper, further out, et cetera, et cetera? But capacity to do that is limited because supply is so low.
Yeah, and this is where people have got to take stock of who they have as a tenant. What do they want? What do they prefer? Do they prefer an individual that they already know that has history, pays their rent on time? Because I can tell you there are a lot of areas and a lot of parts in Sydney where the tenants are skipping on rent, and no different to that property manager that I was speaking about earlier on that's got 15 matters in the tribunal with regards to rental arrears, and five of which will be very strong pleadings for eviction. And then where do you go? And then you've got then you've got the timeout. Then you've got to kick them out, and they stop paying. Then you've got to chase them and all this and all that. Yeah, there's all sorts of different remedies, but at the end of the day, you're not going to get your rental income. So those of our fellows that have got that have got investment properties, and they're looking at increasing the rents. Like some of my clients, have reached out over the last month and said, Edwin, what do I do? How much should I increase it by? I mean, these are just old clients that don't manage the properties anymore, but they're just old clients that like to ring up and have a chat and have a discussion as to what's happening with the property. And I say to them, look, you've got a good tenant. They've been in there for 3 years. They're paying the rent on time. They're paying above average rents. Just think, have a nominal increase, but have a reasonable increase as opposed to your 20-30% increases that you hear about. And in one case they increased it by 5%, and in the other client decided to keep the rent as is because they valued the fact that the tenant was doing their own maintenance to the home, and they seldom got called out for the property manager got called out to do any repairs. And when they did the periodic inspection, they spoke about issues that they had with plumbing and that, and the property manager said, "Oh, let me call the plumber," and they said, "Oh, no, we've already taken care of it. Don't worry." How good is that? Where the tenant pays for plumbing services, and this is what people are doing. Unfortunately, this is what people are sort of, in a way, compelled to do. In this case, it's not for fear of being turfed, but because that's just the nature of this particular tenant. So I said, well, why would you want to increase the rent when you've got that type of tenant? And then at the end of the day, she just said, you know what, I'll just keep the rent as is and give him another 12-month lease.
Absolutely. Well, there are some landlords who are conscious of the broader pressures, but I think a long-term reliable tenant is worth a lot. So I think that's worth just bearing in mind. Well, as we come to the end of the show, just before I throw to your tip of the week, I just wanted to share one of my own, because this article was really interesting. My tip of the week is that commercial property is looking wobbly. And the recent Moody's Investor Services report said that over the next 18 months, investors in listed property are going for a bumpy ride. Now, they did make the point that if you have really high quality office accommodation, that might be okay. But actually, really, because of the change of work practices and weaker asset values, this is going to be a really big problem. And by the way, it's not just a problem in Australia, but it's a problem actually globally as well, particularly in the US. And in fact, some of the US issues that the banks are facing are due to the write-downs now in the value of commercial property. I think this is going to continue, and it's going to hit Australian banks too. So my tip of the week is keep an eye on commercial, and particularly the commercial investment sector. And Edwin, your tip of the week is a bit more straightforward.
Yeah, my tip of the week is just it pays to connect with great tradies. In this case, mechanics. So my Ranger, yes, it's a dual cab, it's a 4-wheel drive, it's a big beast that diesel, turbo, and broke down over the weekend or just before the weekend, and nobody wanted to touch it. Based on what one mechanic was saying was wrong with it, and he was calling his mates and different people that deal with 4-wheel drives and the like. And they were all saying, no, don't want to touch it, too complicated, don't have the time. And two mechanics that said that they could do the work, but I would have to wait for it. I would have to wait 3 weeks for the work to be done. And I thought, oh my God, I really lost touch with mechanics. Apart from my general mechanic, right? But now I found out that he's not really good with the more complicated stuff with the engine. Anyway, so I got a hold of a mechanic out of Penrith, and he had a look at it, and he said, "Yeah, we can fix it. Now, wait for it." So he's fixing the problem for under $1,000. The other two guys were trying to get me to wait. One wanted to change the turbo, the other one wanted to do something else. We were talking about thousands of dollars. So this is what I say. It pays to connect with a great mechanic, great tradespeople in general, but mechanics. And I was talking to him today because I just pop by. I finally got the tow truck driver to just take the car out, and he's working on it already. And it's just he's laid back, easy going, and he's just a diamond, I would say, in the Penrith area, because you can get, if you don't understand. I mean, when I was young, I used to tinker around with cars. I even did an apprenticeship as a panel beater. But you can tinker around with cars and you can pull engines out and do this. But nowadays, my God, everything's so complicated. You just got to leave it alone. But yeah, get to know mechanics, because he was telling me that he's finding it very, very hard to get apprentices. He's finding it very difficult to get licensed mechanics to work for him, and he's offering all sorts of money. But you know what? Nobody wants to get their hands dirty, Martin.
No, very true. Well, I'm afraid that it's true to say that a good mechanic is worth the weight in gold, probably, these days. And there aren't that many of them. So, treat them well, and don't tell too many other people about them. So otherwise,
no, that's what I can give you a plug. I will next week. I promise. I want my car fixed first.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, as we come to the end of the show, I just want to mention that on Tuesday, so tomorrow evening on my live show, I'm going to be actually covering household financial stress analysis at postcode level. So if people want to get information about a particular postcode and see what's going on, come on the show and ask me live, and I'll be able to share some information tomorrow evening on the live show. Otherwise, Edwin will be back next week for another rant. We always say there'll be plenty to talk about. We're never disappointed. It's same old, but it's not. It's actually history rhymes, and there's always more to discuss because, as we've said through this show, things are in a bit of a mess. But there are also things that individuals can do to, get ahead of the curve. And one of the critical ones is to keep watching what we say.
Well, definitely, Martin. And I just hope that those little surprises that we get from week to week don't get any worse. I mean, I'm not expecting a tidal wave to hit the beaches just yet.
Well, I was going to say, if you get a tidal wave up in the mountains there, then we know we have a problem. Edwin, thanks very much. Look forward to seeing you next week, and keep safe meantime. See ya.